Good evening and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining in. It is May the 4th, 2021, and we're here live for another Q&A session with myself, Bo Manry, and my business partner, Chris Goff.
Hey, thanks, Bo, and I'm super excited about this training because we have several questions on pre-foreclosures, seller financing, wholesaling, and some marketing questions. All of these questions have been submitted by REIPro members and is a benefit of being part of the REIPro family. Not only do we love helping our members get answers to their most pressing questions, we are committed to helping you succeed in this business. So I'm ready to rock and roll.
Will we see an influx of pre-foreclosures anytime this year? And if so, should we focus on seller finance and creative deals or more wholesale offers?
Yeah, it seems like every time we turn our head, it's like something changes, right? With the whole, foreclosure market. But, here's what we do know. How's that? I'll tell you what we do know. And what we do know is that millions of homeowners will be leaving this whole COVID-19 related mortgage forbearance here in the next couple of months. So it doesn't mean that there aren't foreclosures happening right now, because there are plenty of foreclosures out there. But when 40 million people potentially will lose their job this year, I think it was 160 some million last year, people are going to lose the house. I mean, it's just common sense. So yes, we do foresee that more are going to be, coming our way. But, I always say, it just takes one deal to do well, right? So you don't need 1,000 of these deals to do well. But I thought I'd show you one thing to pay attention to, and this is going to vary depending on where you live in the country, but I wanted to show you something. Bo, if you wouldn't mind, just get into REIPro, because I want to show you Harris County, Texas, just one example. You have to look at where you are because it is a little bit different. One thing I wanted to point out, especially if you're in this Houston area, is you see underneath the map, you can see all the different properties. What I want you to pay attention to is the recording date versus the actual auction date. And I want you to see, so this very first one, we're looking at April 7th, it got recorded and it's going to auction here at the end of May. Okay, but scroll down, Bo, you could see like 4/14 recording date, just a little bit above. There's several 4/14s, all scheduled for this May 31st. So you don't have a lot of time, so you got to get in. And that's why we say you really do need to pay attention to this at least on a weekly basis, wherever you live. Now, it's going to change. Every county is doing it a little bit different. Not every foreclosure is under this, protective forbearance thing. Okay. So you have to just keep in mind, there are other properties right now that are going to auction, and those are the ones we want to pay attention to, right? So I think as you start to keep checking in at least once a week, this is going to help you stay on top of it, because we just don't know. I wish we could, predict the future, but every time we do, it seems like the government changes something. So
Yeah, that's a good point,
surprise.
Chris. Keep in mind, these leads are fed in here every day, Monday through Friday. So it does change daily.
Yep. Anyways, that was it on that.
All right, let me jump back over to our PowerPoint. Next question from Sonny Y'all. Hi guys, you are the best. My question is a property. ARV is $400,000. The balance owed is $200,000. Now the seller is willing to take monthly payments, but wants a substantial down payment to move. What's the best way to buy this property? Can I let her do a cash out refinance and then buy it with a wraparound mortgage? Thanks.
All right. So I thought I'd actually spend a little bit of time and really break this one down. Now, again, I don't have all the facts here. My very first question is, what does the seller even want for the property? Are they just wanting to walk away with this property, but they want, a bunch of money down so they can move, right? So that's kind of the, when I pick apart certain things and I look at emails, especially from students, I'm looking for keywords like move is the one, right? So they want to move. And they're obviously open to payments, which is already good. So it shows the motivation is there. They need cash. So cash is really the thing that we have to concentrate on. Now, seller financing obviously would be the strategy here. If they owe 200, it has to be a wraparound mortgage because there's already existing financing on this. But now that would be the easiest thing to tell you is, look, seller finance it, put a wraparound mortgage. Obviously, you need to find out what is considered a substantial down payment. Is that 15,000 or is that 50,000? What is substantial? I think that's going to be different for everybody. But, without understanding the cost of repairs and all that stuff, let's just assume this is a great deal. Let's assume that this is one of those I call home run deals. I want to give you one example, and this is one of many, but just one. And I want you to try to follow me here as best you can. And this is really for everybody. So yes, we would want to do a seller finance. And I want you to look over to the left of your screen where it says purchase seller finance. So if the ARV is 400, the seller owes 200, let's just say that a substantial down payment is 50 grand. So we want to give the owner 50 grand. Okay. But we can't give her the 200, then 50, because she's not going to take, or he's not going to take that 50 and apply it to their mortgage balance of 200. So we would ultimately have to buy this at 250 minus the 50 that we're going to put down. And that will bring our balance to the exact same balance of what the owner owes to their bank. And I hope you followed me there. I would set an interest rate at 3.5%. We would amortize this loan over 30 years to keep the payments down, but do a 5-year balloon, meaning that we're going to make monthly payments to you for up to 5 years. And at the end of 5 years, whatever the balance owed, we will cash you out. So taxes and insurance, I just put $360 a month. Total payment, $1,258.09. Can't even say that. First thing you want to do is obviously understand, what are we going to do with this property, right? So we would actually know this before I even made the offer. Now, one exit strategy you could do is a lease option in this case. And again, let's just assume that the house is in great shape. Again, you could play with these numbers, and maybe if you play with the numbers enough, maybe this way wouldn't work for you, but it is one way. So we're going to sell this property on a lease option at 400 with 15,000 down. And we're going to rent it out for 2,500 a month for 12 months, only 12 months. If you need to go longer, you could always renew it. All right, Bo. After 6 months, you could refinance this property. There's a very good reason why you'd want to do this. Okay, and I want to get to it. So the ARV is 400. Maybe we get a 75% on the 400, which will be 300. Maybe our new interest rate is 4.5%, amortized 30 years. Tax and insurance will stay the same. Total monthly payment is now $1,880. So now keep in mind, where I used to, I bought this house for 250, put 50 down, I owe 200. Now I've actually created more debt on the property at 300. Okay. Now I would never ever do this if I didn't think I could cash flow. Okay. So I know I'm renting it out on a lease option for 2,500. I know that I'll have some cash flow. Click it one more time, Bo. So this refinance is, number one, going to pay the existing mortgage off from the seller. Okay. So it doesn't matter that I said I would go 5 years. Okay. Whoops. Microphone's falling. Hold on. Tighten up.
Getting excited over here teaching all this, right?
I'm so used to standing doing this. And a lot of people, if you see me live, like I use my hands a lot and I'm hitting crap and all that stuff. So the first thing that gets paid off is going to be that existing loan. Now, although you have 5 years, you have up to 5 years. You could pay them off. There's no prepayment penalty with the seller finance. You could pay them off the very next day, but up to 5 years. So this is also going to pay you back the 50,000 that you put down. Okay. So ultimately this is going to leave you $50,000. Okay. So keep this in mind. $300,000 new loan comes in. It pays off the $200,000 existing mortgage from the seller. You're done with the seller. They're not in the picture anymore. Plus recuperates the $50,000 that you put down on the deal. Okay. So the best part about that $50,000 is it's tax-free because you're not going to pay taxes on borrowed money. Now let's go back or go to the next screen. Let's just kind of fast forward and the buyer buys at the end of 12 months. So remember their sales price was 400 minus the down payment of 15. They owe me 385. So the new purchase price is going to pay off my existing debt at this point because now there's a new loan on it of the 300. So we're not going to build any equity in, this short amount of time. So I'm just keeping it simple for everyone. So 385 minus 300. Of course, there will be some closing costs in here, but just keep the number simple. 85,000. So remember, our profit center is going to be a little bit different because we broke it up. So the first 6 months is our first profit center is we made the down payment of 15. Then we have cash flow. You can see I'm breaking it down 2,500 minus our total monthly payment. We had $1,200 in cash flow times 12 or 6 months, 7,400. We also refinanced that and got 50,000 back. So think about it. At this point, I have zero money invested in the property at this point. Okay, so that's a total profit of 72 grand right there. Now we go to the last 6 months. Now our cash flow has gotten eaten up, but who cares? I have all this tax-free money that I won't have to go pay taxes on. If I didn't refinance it and the lease option buyer bought it, I would have to pay taxes on all of that different spread. Okay, so cash flow is only 3,700 in that 6 months, still good. We profited from the difference in the sales price at that 85 number. It gives us 88,720. So it gives us a total profit there, Bo, 161,000. Now keep in mind, this is just one way. There are numerous other ways that you could have structured this deal. And I think that's the important part, is that I wanted to take you down one road because yes, I like the seller finance in this situation. I think that is the strategy of choice, but I don't know how much in repairs this home needs either. I don't know some of the other facts that, need to go into this. So you could adjust these numbers accordingly and you would still profit very well. I would say this would be best case scenario going this path. 161, not too bad. They don't happen every day, but they happen. And, you have to think about how many of these deals do you need to do a year to replace your current income? And that's the beauty of one thing I love about real estate is it only takes one sometimes. So it's a good deal. So I hope you can take some of this information. Sometimes you be a little bit creative. Some people will say, Chris, I can't refinance it. Well, then don't refinance it. You don't have to. I refinanced it because part of that income that I made is now tax-free. Okay. Plus, in this example, I didn't put any repairs into this property. Okay. Which maybe this property needs repairs. I don't know. So again, I don't have all the facts on it, but wanted to take you down a road. If you ever get into a seller finance situation, there are numerous seller finance strategies, by the way. And when I come up with this new seller finance training series inside of REIPro, I'm going to share with you a couple of other cool seller finance strategies, especially ones where you need cash out of the deal. So there's one called subordination. One, we actually did a seller finance and we call it substitution of collateral. And instead of the seller taking back the mortgage and putting it on the house, we used a boat as the collateral, which would free up the house, which gave me new financing on the house. And it was more of an income raiser. And then I took that finance money and then I moved it into other projects because it's an easy way to get money. Now that sounds very bizarre, and it is kind of bizarre actually. How many sellers will put the collateral on a boat versus the house, but they're out there. But so we're going to be talking about all kinds of creative financing strategies, and and not just the standard seller finance. But hope that helped.
Next question from Katrina. It's a general question. What is the process of dealing with a trust?
Well, trust is, to me, is you approach this almost like any other deal. Outside the fact that, there are a lot of trust where, the family member passes on and they put the property in a trust and they give it to the kids. And that's kind of the one scenario I'm really looking for. But properties in trust could be motivated at any moment of time. Somebody doesn't have to pass on to be motivated. But I work them just like every other deal. Now, the language in my marketing is going to be different. And that's why we provide several different templates in REIPro just for this particular type of lead source. But I would say the number one key when you're working with properties in a trust is multiple offers. And generally, not always, generally there's multiple people involved. Okay, so, it's sometimes difficult. I did this one deal, Bo. There were 11 people on it. You know how hard it is to get 11 people to agree?
Yeah, I can't get me, my wife, and kid to agree on dinner.
Oh my! Sometimes they take a little bit longer to work, but as soon as you get it to work, it's a deal. And I tell you a quick story. Those of you have heard me talk about this story. It's happened years ago, but one of my students, his name is Rex Kress, and 71 years old. And he was actually at an event that we were doing. He said, I need you to coach me. I don't care what the cost is. I'm going to work with you. And I was like, all right, well, let's sit down. He's like, nope, this is what I'm going to do. He had owned a construction business. And as you know, what happened in 2007, 8, 9, I mean, everybody went out of business. And he had to start over again at 71 years old, And his very first deal was actually a property in a trust. And there were 3 brothers. Okay. And keep in mind, Rex was 71. He was the guy who's like, he wasn't scared of nothing. Like he'd walk, I was with him at his very first property. And one of the brothers was there showing us the property. And he's walking around. He's like, oh, it needs this and it needs that. We're going to put a lot of money. He's saying this all in front of the owner. Like he had no fear whatsoever. It was awesome. Right. And I guess you figure he's 71 years old, I mean, what is he scared of? Right. I mean, he's 71. So we made 3 offers. Right. So I structured all 3 offers. So we do a cash offer, right? Because the kids, they just wanted to sell, take the cash and move on. The second offer we made was a lease option offer. And the third offer was a seller finance offer. So we submitted the offers and he told my student Rex, he said, hey, let me get with my other 2 brothers and I'll get back in touch with you. So a couple days goes by and he calls Rex and says, hey, Rex, hey, I talked to my brothers and we came up with which offer we're going to take. And he said, great, which offer is it going to be? And the brother said, we're going to take the lease option offer, but what is it? And Rex, my student, just got started. He's like, oh, you know what a lease option is? It's just a lease with an option. And the brother's like, oh, okay. We always wondered what that was. And he just got started. Rex didn't even know exactly what the lease option was, but he knew, he could just, hey, Chris, now what do I got to do? But you just never know with people. And I think although cash may look great on, that hardcore cash and be done with the property, that lease option offer made a lot more sense because the sales price was a lot higher. And that's what the kids wanted. So that was his very first deal, which was a property in a trust.
Just a lease with an option.
Just a lease with an option.
Oh,
that's everyone's advice. If you don't know all the details about a lease with, lease options, just say that. No, it's just a lease with an option. You know what it is.
Next question from Leslie, and it's a marketing question. What are your plans when the new rules come into effect in June regarding SMS texting and registering company info with campaigns? Is this the end of texting? Regards. Thanks, Leslie, for the question. You know, this really is kind of a hot topic, especially right now with all these new rulings, regulations. Now, from an REIPro perspective, obviously we're doing all the things to continue to make texting for things like your calendar reminders. Those will continue to flow and all that stuff. But, you know, to answer your question specifically, and this full answer here could take a really long time to dive into all the regulatory bodies that are governing all this stuff. Everybody from the FCC, the Federal Trade Commission, what they call the CTIA, or the Cellular Telecommunication Industry Association. And these are all the people representing carriers like AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and so on. But, you know, in a nutshell, there was a longstanding ruling in 1990, in the early 90s, called the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. And this was governing all the unwanted, unsolicited phone calls. Eventually, text messaging got wrapped into there, but it specifically involved auto dialer technology. That was really the big key thing. And if you've seen us on these calls before, you're pretty aware that, look, REIPro takes a stance that we just don't provide direct text messaging platforms. We've done this kind of on purpose because we want to make sure you guys don't get in trouble. There's a lot of rules around there. So it would be illegal for you to purchase a list from somebody, including REIPro, and then send out mass text messaging without that person's specific consent to receive it. Okay. And these carriers, Verizon, AT&T, Mobile, they have gotten millions of complaints over the last couple of years, especially during the election year. I mean, it's just millions of complaints. And so what they are doing, and what I think you're specifically talking about, is they're starting to tighten these rules, and they're forcing businesses to register what's called a 10DLC, stands for 10-digit long code. It's basically a real telephone number that is tracked back to you or your organization. It has to be registered with a text messaging platform. It all goes back to the carrier, and you've got permission. You have to provide what they call a use case. So you're going to take this 10-digit telephone number. You have a very specific use case, like say appointment reminders, something like that. And you have to get and send examples of these messages in order to get approved. So if you don't register one of these on the texting platforms and you have a valid use case, what's going to happen is the carriers like Verizon and all of them, they're just going to start banning your text messages altogether. And a lot of this is rolling out, starting to take into effect by the end of July. So what I say in a nutshell is an ending of text messaging? No, but you do have to have permission and opt in. That's the key. You have to have an opt-in permission from the person you're texting, or the carriers are going to stop delivering that and just shut it all down together. So they're really tightening their belt on that one. Next question from Carol, wholesaling. How do I find a property value in order to know what to offer a seller?
Well, this one's pretty simple. If you're in REIPro, all you have to do is just run the comps, right? So we want to run comparable sales so we can find out what has sold, you know, around that area that is comparable to this particular subject property. And then as simple as just putting, you know, that's going to determine what we call an after repaired value, you know, that abbreviation ARV. Then all we're going to do is just put it in our all cash offer formula. And that's going to tell you, as soon as you start to fill all that out, it's going to tell you exactly what you can pay the seller. I mean, I think we have set this up so simple. It couldn't be any easier the way that we have this set up. So you got to put a property into REIPro first, run the comparable sales. You'll see that under your menu tool system. And then you go to step 4 and run that all cash offer. And that's going to give you exactly what you can pay from a wholesaling or retailing standpoint.
Next question from Art on wholesaling. How do you determine the value of a property if it's a teardown and a home on the same street is selling for $1 million?
Hey, Art. Now, if this must be a teardown, because sometimes obviously you can repair the home and then make it look like that $1 million house, right? And you could do really well if you could do that, because you're going to hit a whole different price point. And usually when people are tearing down properties and rebuilding these nice big properties, it's a very desirable area, right? So if you can bring in a little bit smaller price point in there, by not going so big, those are so much easier to sell, so much easier. But otherwise, if it has to be torn down, just obvious things, you're going to need to get the cost of tearing the property down. And then what is new building going to cost? But you really need to keep this in comparison to what is going on, what's trending in this particular neighborhood, and really kind of start following those guidelines. Usually it takes one or two people to do this, and then people start to catch on and follow along. I always hate it because the seller goes, yeah, I know, but my property is worth a lot more because they're tearing these suckers down and putting $1 million houses down. So you got to get into these neighborhoods fairly early, but you got to follow the trends, but you got to look at, the cost of tear down and then new construction cost.
Which wood is extremely expensive right now.
Wood is, we saw this graphic just on wood. Like wood is so hard to get in certain spots of the country right now. I don't know where everybody lives, but wood has gone through the roof.
Have you seen that?
It's crazy.
Have you seen that post on Facebook? Somebody showing 2 pieces of plywood and said, willing to trade for slightly used 1 to 2 year old low mileage Mercedes, and don't send me a bunch of crap because I know what we got. That's how bad it is. I know. Oh, next question from Todd. Number 1, are there any plans for REIPro developing a CRM for its members in the future? Number 2, once the forbearance for renters and owners is lifted, what do you see happening in the following 6 to 12 months? And how would you be marketing to reach those properties? Thanks as always. The support staff is terrific. Yeah, hi, Todd. I think we answered the question really on the CRM part. We do have the basics, and we're going to be expanding that here in the future. But for your second question on the forbearance stuff for the renters and the owners, now, from my understanding, all of this is about to end in June, around June 30th, or on June 30th. And that's for both renters and owners, but we don't really know what the administration is going to do. Every time we put something out there, it seems like it changes. Will there be another extension? Don't know. But according to the guidelines, especially on like the renter side, there's nothing that's going to prevent the landlord from asking for all the past rents that, haven't been paid. And when this ban expires, it's quite likely these landlords are going to go and seek all of this past rent that they haven't been collected. So a lot of people are potentially going to be, evicted. But the same is true for the owners. If they were in the forbearance programs, if they're still in trouble, their situation hasn't changed, then we're going to see a lot of foreclosures start to happen. So how would you market those people? Go into REIPro. You'll be able to pull those pre-foreclosures. Chris showed you that example. Harris County, Texas. They're coming in every single day. So you can start marketing to these people. Even today, I would get out there and do it now so that you have time to see if these people are in trouble. Go ahead and help them now to get out of that situation even before this all expires.
Yeah, and that's where a coach really comes into play with stuff like this.
Montreal, a general question. How does the new dashboard graph help us determine a good area to invest in? What should we pay the most attention to on these new graphs? Also, I am concentrating on low equity for sub 2s and wraps. Is this a good strategy for this lead type?
Yeah, so let me tell you about the 2 graphs. Number 1, because this is really important to me. And, I could tell you every single one of my coaching students is one of the very first things that we talk about is determining what we call is a C neighborhood. So we classify neighborhoods from A, B, C, and D. And that C neighborhood is generally the middle price point. I remember when I got started, like I was driving in the wrong neighborhoods because they weren't the neighborhoods for the strategy that I was trying to work. And I didn't know, I was not too smart. I was just trying to figure it all out. And one of the things that these new graphs really do provide is a more, defined area. Say, hey, is this a place that I would want to target market based on price points? Is that the middle price point marketplaces? And that's where I really want to spend the majority of my time. The majority of my marketing dollars are going to go into that middle price point. Now, you don't have to pick a big city like a Houston, but, start pinpointing. Maybe it's a zip code. Maybe it's a small town in the rural area. It's really trying to understand where those middle price points are. And that's going to help you determine, is this a good area that I want to target? And I think, just from an education standpoint of knowing, if I went to somebody and one of the questions I ask is, do you know the median price range where you live? And people generally don't know, or they give me this large range of prices, because to me as a coach, I have to pinpoint very specific areas that I want you to target. And, people that live in a smaller town is a lot different than somebody in a bigger city. But, that's why that graph is there to begin with. Now, the second part of your question is low equity types of leads here. Let me tell you right now, you do not want to be working any kind of seller finance strategy, which you call sub twos and wraps, working with low equity, because those numbers are going to come way too close. The one strategy that always point people on is the lease option. So if I'm working low equity, because I know with the lease option, I can pay up to full price, because we're really buying it on terms. I don't want to invest into a property that I'm going to own and be responsible for with not much equity in it. And so I would stay away from, seller financing with low equity leads. And I would approach the lease option strategy, actually. You're on mute. You muted yourself.
I will just repeat myself. Iris Carter, wholesaling. I'm in Maryland. There are many issues with Maryland. I'm a wholesaler. Can you speak to options I can use for getting pre-foreclosures, non-assignment clauses written in section 52 of a sales contract, and non-deal agencies?
Well, I can tell you Maryland is tricky, especially when it comes to pre-foreclosures. The law is very complex. And from my understanding, you can do it with an agent. So if an agent has it, if it's listed for sale through an agent, you can buy those properties all day long. Where the problem comes in is marketing those specific types of properties. And they have rules and laws against that. So you would not want to send somebody a postcard. You wouldn't want to send somebody a letter. You would not want to pick up the phone and call them. Now, I will say there are no police running around probably monitoring these types of things, but it's going to be someone that complains, right? So, the one thing that I would probably steer more towards in Maryland is maybe building like a landing page where people come to you. The very first thing I think a lot of people do when they're in trouble is they Google it. And if you've got a landing page or something up there that talks about in general, you got to watch how you word things, about buying properties, keep it simple. If they opt in, then you can call them. So I would be more interested maybe from that side of marketing. But again, I would want you to get with the attorney. They do make it very difficult in the state of Maryland when it comes to pre-foreclosures. As far as wholesaling and assigning, that's just a matter of contracts. So you could do wholesaling all day long in Maryland, all day long. And of course, I would always say use our REIPro contract, but always have every contract, reviewed by somebody that actually knows what they're talking about. A lot of attorneys are not going to have a clue what you're talking about. A lot of attorneys don't study these very specific types of things, but you definitely want to have an attorney review that. So, and lease options is another, strategy in Maryland where you have to follow certain guidelines, and the laws, I've actually studied that part of it enough to know what needs to go in an agreement on a lease option. But pre-foreclosures is just tough in Maryland. I would say go to Virginia. That's the easy answer. But hopefully that will help you a little bit, but I don't use realtor contracts. I use my own contracts. I have to make sure that I have the right to assign property. And you can do that all day long. Okay. So hopefully that will help.
Next question.
Move out of Maryland. That's maybe the easiest solution. It'll cost you $15,000 to move out of Maryland to go make, $200,000 in this business, right? It's just look at a return on investment.
It's not Maryland that's taxing rainwater and stuff, is it?
Yeah. So, all this, the EPA came into Maryland, and you know how rainfall comes down and it sits on top of these buildings? Well, they were getting taxed on the amount of rainfall that could potentially standing water, because it was going back into the Chesapeake Bay, where they were trying to get the government to, spend all this money to help clean up the Chesapeake. And so they started taxing people, and it's crazy, but it is what it is. Next
question from Marlene. Is it possible to stay logged into REIPro? Hi, Marlene. Now, once you log into REIPro from a specific device, let's just say your computer, your browser, specifically the same browser, it should remember that you've logged in before, unless you specifically log out of that device. If you switch browsers, switch devices, go to a tablet, yes, it's going to make you log back in on a device it hasn't seen. But if that's not happening to you, hey, reach out to our support staff so we can check on it for you. Linda, general question. Does REIPro offer a proof of funds letter?
We do not. And I'll just tell you why. This is probably one of the easiest things that you can get. If you're going to get, approved at any lending institution, they're going to give you this. I think the people that offer a lot of times these proof of funds it may not be as legitimate. Like they could loan it, but they may not. I haven't really qualified for it. I can see people getting into a lot of trouble with this. So we don't do it, and it's just too easy to get. So when you get pre-approved, they're going to give you one. Any lending institution will do this.
Yep. Jessica, wholesaling, what to do if you aren't having any luck finding available homes in your target area?
So I'm going to stick with wholesaling because that's the subject. I always say, number one, are we in the right areas? Number one. Number two, change up the marketing in your area. And then number three, and I actually did this. So I was in College Station, Texas, and it's a small college town, about 100,000 people, 50,000 of them are students. All right. So a lot of investors. And we were doing plenty of deals, but it was just like, I don't know, just got in this car, drove down the same street. I wanted to go somewhere new. So I actually drove an hour and a half away to Waco, Texas. And I started doing the exact same thing. I would drive around, and I found some properties, and a lot more distressed properties too, by the way. And just by going somewhere else. And yeah, it was a little bit further out. I just took the whole day. I was like, okay, it's an hour and a half there. It's an hour and a half back. I'm going to spend the whole day and hopefully find some deals. So I found this property for rent, and I wrote it down. When I got back to College Station, I called the owner and I said, hi, my name is Chris. I was calling about the property you have for rent. And he said, yeah. I said, well, I was actually interested in buying it. Are you looking to sell? And he said, yeah, I want to sell that. Actually, I want to sell everything I have. I said, well, what do you got? And he said, I've got 18 houses. And I'm like, cha-ching. It's like, that's what I wanted to hear. And long story short, I ended up putting all 18 houses under contract. And this was kind of early on. And of course, I was a nervous wreck because, I'm used to just doing one house at a time. And now I've got like 18. It took forever to figure out how to put it on a contract. And then I was nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, who's going to buy this? Who's going to buy this? So I just called one of my investors that bought some properties from me in College Station, hour and a half away, and said, hey, would you be interested in these properties in Waco. And he said, how much? You know, and I gave him the price, and he goes, let's go look at them. And, you know, it was a process to go and inspect the 18 houses. There's a couple of really funny and hilarious stories along the way with that story. But it just shows you, you know, if you start getting out, you know, that led me into thinking, hey, I could hit these smaller rural towns where there's like 5,000 people and do the exact same thing. So it just started doing that all over the place. So always look at a combination. You always want to start in your backyard. So are you in the right neighborhoods? Are we saying the right things? Are we using the right marketing materials? And then number three, maybe venture out.
You know, sometimes going out with students, I remember this one student just said he couldn't find anything. Then we get in the car to start, you know, showing him what you're looking through your eyes as a professional investor. And we looked at, like, within a couple of hours, found 30 right there in his backyard. So sometimes just knowing what you're looking for.
That happens almost 100% of the time.
Yeah.
You know, before, you know, COVID happened, I would do a lot of infield training for my students. So I'd fly in for a couple of days. And to me, one of the most important things is not necessarily getting in your car, but it's understanding what in the world you're looking for and how to see these things. I mean, I have so many numerous stories, and it's like you said, Bo, it's seeing through my eyes, right? Or your eyes. And you start to pick up on these things as you learn this business. But I remember driving with a student in Austin, Texas, and I said, hey, that house is vacant. And my student's like, no, there's a car in the driveway. I said, yeah, the tag expired 3 years ago. It's like you've trained my eyes to look for very specific things while I'm driving that has really helped me identify these, you know, potential deals.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when I got started, it was just big stuff like tall grass, boarded windows, and the obvious, right? And now I'm looking at stuff where the yard is completely mowed, but it's those personal things that you would normally have if somebody lived there. It's the expired tag. It's so many other different reasons. And those are the things that you have to train your eye to see. And you will be surprised. 100% of the time I did infield training with my student, you know, it's like, Chris, I'm just not seeing these deals. And as soon as we get there, I'm like, one down the street from where they lived. I'm like, there's one right there. And they're like, how do you see that? You know, oh my gosh. And it's like a wake up call for a lot of people, but it just shows you it's so important to understand how to see these things in your marketplace. And that's why I always spend a lot of time doing it in infield training, which I don't do right now. But before COVID, I always say, you know, infield training was always the eye opener because of these types of things here.
Yep. Gene, lease options. In a sandwich lease option, does the lease option payment we receive from the tenant buyer get deducted from the agreed upon sales price?
Hey, Gene, no, unless you're going to give monthly credits, which anyone that knows me, I don't like if I'm the one doing the lease option, like if I'm living in the house doing the lease option, I'll get as much credits as I want. But when I'm staying in the middle of the deals, I don't want to give that away to the new buyer. And there's a lot of reasons we won't go into on this particular training, but you don't really want to get in a habit of doing that. If you do any kind of monthly credits, you definitely want to keep them very small. Now, monthly credits basically means if you pay me $1,500 a month and I give you $100 monthly credit, $100 times each month that you pay me on time will be deducted from the purchase price. It's not something where you take $1,500, take $100 out of that and save it in a shoebox for closing. It's just a paper credit that goes towards the sales price.
Make sure I went.
I think it went the other way.
No, I think it went the other way. All right, Gene, yes. Seller financing. Here's a hypothetical transaction. I love that because it's probably a real deal here. Hypothetical transaction. Let's assume I gain control of a property using a wraparound mortgage. I stay in the middle, and then I turn around and sell the property to a retail buyer at a higher price and a higher rate with seller financing. Does the title transfer from any party to another at any point during the time payments are being made? In the same situation, what happens if the retail buyer stops making payments? Will I have the right to start a foreclosure on the property?
Yeah, just so everyone knows, some people asked more questions. I did limit it to 2, so this is Gene's second one here, but actually this is very easy. Yes, the deed will travel, but there's going to be a point where that price is starting to get up where the numbers just don't make sense. But yeah, the theory behind that is, yes, the deed is going to keep traveling throughout. You could technically do it as many times as you want. If you seller financed it to a buyer and they stop making payments, then yes, you would be the one foreclosing with the buyer. But also keep in mind, you're still making the payments to the seller you seller financed it from during that time frame. So yeah, obviously it's not a good situation to foreclose on someone, but it would be a foreclosure where, like a lease option, that would be an eviction. And seller financing, it's going to be a foreclosure. That's it. Woohoo.
That was it.
Yeah, we definitely want to leave time for obviously additional questions. People that were from our meetups and everywhere else, we wanted to leave a little bit of time for additional questions as well. So thank you guys so much for submitting these questions. And I really hope that it helped. You know, sometimes just picking up one little tip here and there makes a big difference. So I hope it helped.
Yep. And I did want to put this screen up. We did have some people just before we even jumped on the call that was looking at some previous live Q&As and had mentioned some coaching programs. Look, if you need some personal support, need a little bit extra help, need some coaching, just send us an email to coaching@myreipro.com and we will respond.
Yeah, I will personally respond to you.
So it is time for questions. Open up the Q&A panel. You can start typing them in there. I'm going to check the chat. I think I saw a couple that were going into the chat window. It would do me a really favor to put them in the Q&A panel. Okay, so the first one from Darian: how do you approach an REO property? And are these something that a beginner should try to go after?
Number one, you got to go through a realtor because they're going to have access to those. They're going to show you the property. They'll make all the offers and they don't even cost you a penny because the seller pays real estate commission. So, which is nice. But I do like REO properties. Again, I wouldn't say rehabbing is generally the very first thing somebody should get started with. I would say it's probably one of the more difficult strategies. Number one, you have to have access to money. Then you got to understand managing contractors. Then you got to fix up the property. Then you got to sit on the property till it sells and so on. So I wouldn't say it would be a beginner strategy. I would say wholesaling, lease options, those two would be great beginner strategies.